Hey, this is Gloria, the pink-haired investor from Realtor, and I have Ted King with Goosehead Insurance on with me today. So I've been talking with Ted about some of my own properties and some things, and I thought it would just be good to kind of share some of our conversations with you and see how he can help us. So hi, Ted, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Ted's been kind of a staple if any of you investors are on the chat groups. He's kind of in there, gets referred a lot, and I kept hearing about him, bumping into him. Finally, I'm like, okay, let's sit down and have a conversation ourselves. So we sat down for coffee, and I just kind of explained my situation where right now I've got, well, at the time I had 4 properties and was thinking about picking up a 5th. And I'm like, how can you help me with insurance? So he kind of got started, and I feel like you do well with investors because, and tell me why is that's something that you can give us a lot of help on?
Yeah, I think the biggest portion of that is really 2 things. So one, our company Goosehead was founded by real estate investors. So Mark and Robin Jones, 21, 22 years ago, she's probably one of the top 10 real estate female investors in the nation. And she had a hard time getting insurance on her properties. And so her husband leaves his corporate executive job and says, I think we could do this better. So starts this thing, Goosehead Insurance, and then it blows up. It's traded, on the stock market as of about 3 years ago. It opens at $20 a share. It's been as high as 170. Like everybody else, it's taking a bath right now. It's in the $80 or $90 range, but it's just exploded. And so they made sure that when we get lots of companies in a particular state, it's investor friendly. So I think that's one. I think that the other thing is 3 years ago, I became an investor. I bought my first rental property, and I have a duplex over in Lawrence. And I had to start thinking about insurance differently, because when you have lots of houses to insure, and the way claims work or liability works, and maybe it exposes your personal net worth, you just have to start thinking about how to protect yourself differently. So it actually made me a better insurance agent once I became an investor. And now that I'm in this so much, I can have coherent conversations.
Mm-hmm. So you know the
with
lingo.
investors. And even give my thoughts and opinions of things that are a little bit outside of my realm of just insurance, but can say, hey, but look, as an investor, here's what I'm doing. LLC or no LLC, or umbrella or no umbrella. So just talking about those things as well, I think has been a breath of fresh air for a lot of investors, because they're used to saying, here's a policy, here's your monthly rate. Do you want it? Yes or no? And that's it. And what we do is it's very different.
Well, and even as a personal investor too, I mean, just kind of a side note, like I'll send investors to you and they're looking at this property and you look at it and you're like, no, that's a bad area of town. You don't want to buy there. Or, this is a really great deal. So it's kind of, I tell my new investors that you want more than one set of eyes on this property. You don't want like a total turnkey where, the person's buying it for you and flipping it for you and renting it out. Get different people in different sectors to give you ideas. And if you've got an insurance guy and a lender and a realtor and a property manager all saying it's a good deal, it's a good deal because they're out of state, they're not here, they don't know the areas. And so I feel like outside of the insurance realm, you've really been a help to my investors in that way as well.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. All the tools and resources that we have, we can look at prior claims on a residence. We can see if the rates are higher because that zip code's had tons of break-ins. Anything like that. When people come to work with us, we make sure to share as much information as they would like to know.
So that's awesome. I didn't even know you did that kind of stuff. So that's great. So, and we can totally use me as an avatar of, let's start with my hold properties. So right now I've got 4 hold properties. One of them is a little bit unique because it's got 2 different units on the same one. So me coming in, I'm just going to do a regular hold property, might have to do a little bit of construction, but nothing really big. What would you recommend for me to get started? And what are some things I need to look out for?
Right. So with these types of properties, long-term buy and hold, tenant occupied, people coming in, insurance companies know that typically 30 to 60 days after you buy a property, there's going to be some work. There's going to be some minor cosmetic work. So what does that mean? It'd be nice if they gave us a list, but they don't. So it could be flooring, it could be cabinetry, it could be paint, It could be any of those type things. Where it gets iffy is if we start moving load-bearing walls, replumbing something, electrical. That's where a different type of policy is usually needed, or if the vacancy with the rehab is going to be longer than that 30 to 60 days. So for yours, when it's just kind of cosmetic and you have tenants in right away, we want to get you what's called a DP3 replacement cost policy. So I know the DP3 term doesn't mean anything to anybody. Here's how it works. It's a replacement cost policy. So you should think your roof blows off, you pay your deductible, you get a new roof, right? So there are types of policies that'll do a depreciated value and things, but normal tenant occupied, long-term buy and holds, you should be looking for a replacement cost policy. And they cover more and they're typically cheaper. So when you're eligible for that type of policy, you should get it. Because the vacant ones, the flip ones, the ones that have the construction, they're usually more expensive and they cover less. So for you, we're recommending these DP3 replacement cost type policies. They cover additional structures. They'll cover loss of rent. So if a fire happens or a pipe burst and your tenant has to move out, like we'll pay you the rent that you should have gotten while they're out for 3 months or 4 months. And a lot of times you're responsible for putting them up somewhere else during the time that your place is being rehabbed. And with most of our companies, they'll pay for that as well. So these are all little small things that when people normally get quotes and go, here's your monthly rate, they don't even talk about these things. So for us, we try to educate and go through those things. But for yours, DP3's replacement cost policy is definitely the way to go.
So for instance, and this is just honestly a question I'm asking you because this just happened. We're working on getting everything switched to Ted, but we're not there yet. So I had a sewer issue in one of my places. I had to put him up for just a week, so it's not like months and months, but he had to be in a hotel for a week. Is that something that maybe some of my insurance policies would have covered?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it all depends on what's on the policy. So if you had sewer coverage on your policy, that would be a covered loss. And at that point, yes, your insurance could pay to put them up somewhere. Now, the sewer coverage endorsement is a separate thing that people say yes or no to. And if you said no to it and you don't have it, then no, they're not going to cover it. And then they're not going to pay to put the person up.
So definitely look at those different add-ons. If you're in a place that's notorious for different types of repairs, you might want to look at those add-ons.
Yeah, in Indianapolis in particular, there's two coverages I get asked. One is water backup coverage for basements and sump pumps. The other one is service line coverage, which is the water and sewer line outside the house. I will tell you 90%, 95% of the companies don't offer the service line coverage for the water and sewer line outside of the house. There are companies that offer it, but they're not going to be your cheapest. So if you want to spend a little bit more and have it, you can have it, but most companies don't even offer it. The water backup coverage is offered by almost everybody. You should pay them $50 a year for something like that. And that's where if water backs up into the home or a sump pump fails and it floods a basement, it covers those kinds of things. And so those are two endorsements that sometimes people put on, sometimes they don't, but we always talk about them. But then they'll say, yes or no to that. But if you want to have the loss of rent coverage, that only comes in for a covered loss. For instance, during COVID, we got this question a lot. Hey, it's COVID and my tenant just can't pay. Can my insurance cover it? And the answer is no. The pandemic is not a covered loss. Okay. So it has to be from like a burst pipe, a fire, things like that.
So speaking about the water, so we both know that there are several different areas in Indianapolis that require flood insurance. Can we go down that route for a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. So that's like a scary, you're looking at buying a house and you're planning and trying to make sure you're beating the 1% rule, and all of a sudden, boom, it's in a flood zone. You're like, oh my gosh, flood insurance, because flood insurance can get very expensive. So here's the deal with flood insurance. You should not be scared just because some place requires flood insurance. Based on if you pay cash, you won't necessarily have to have flood insurance. If you get a loan, if it's a traditional loan, they will make you get flood insurance, but you would be eligible for private flood insurance, which is usually half the cost of the FEMA type flood insurance. If you get in like an FHA or a government-backed loan, like the FDA or FHA, they are going to require you to get like the FEMA-backed flood insurance, and it will be probably the most expensive.